And so now the question is, do I do the whole review with the dragon on my shoulder or just the intro? I love you, bud. You're a little distracting. So, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World, the conclusion to the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. And that's very much a definitive conclusion, I have to say. And I'm not sure that's really too much of a spoiler. Basically, all the marketing has made it very clear this is it for this thing. And I went into this with a lot of hope and a lot of fear because I have immense affection for this series. The first two films I absolutely adore. I've seen a little bit of the TV show. It looked pretty good, but I haven't had the time to really dig into it. And honestly, the graphical downgrade does kind of eat at me because I have the movies as a point of reference. I had the same problem trying to get into the Kung Fu Panda TV stuff. But I've heard from other folks that that's actually quite good. But I adore these films. I think they are phenomenal, and wrapping everything up was not going to be an easy thing because these have not only been beautiful films with great characters and terrific relationships between them, but they have had really strong core emotional journeys that have largely had to do with growing up. And I was afraid that, I don't know why I was afraid of this, but I was afraid that the film was going to lose that thread a bit. Now that, spoiler for the second one, I guess, now that Hiccup's dad is gone, now that Stoic's dead. So I went into this just hoping to God they nailed the emotional core of this. And they did. For the record, in case anyone is wondering, 3. That's how many times I cried during this movie. It is worth noting that it was backloaded. All 3 of those happened probably within the last 10 to 15 minutes of the film. Maybe the last 20. But it was pretty much condensed at the back end. So the setup is a pretty straight continuation from the previous film. The residents of Berk are continuing to work to fight against and free dragons from trappers who are trying to get them to warlords who want to use them as weapons. And they've been doing this for a while, actually to the point that Berk is now almost completely overrun with dragons, and like they really can't fit anymore where they are. And now there is a new foe in the form of a guy named Grimold, who is basically a dragon killer. He's not a trapper, he's not a trainer, he's a killer. And he's been brought in by the warlords to take out specifically Toothless, because apparently this guy really has a real keen thing for Night Furies as a target. And as this is going on, we also, and this isn't a spoiler, this actually turned out to be way less of a spoiler than I thought it was going to be, because she gets introduced almost immediately, which is a female Night Fury, but is all white. It gets referred to as the Light Fury here. And so Toothless is trying to figure out how to impress her, and there's a lot of dialogue-free bonding between the two of them that's really well done. Sometimes played for laughs, other times played for emotion. All of it works. Very much like how the best moment of bonding in that first film was a wordless sequence of Toothless trying to imitate Hiccup, scratching out an image in the sand. This is able to pick up that sort of mantle in terms of delivering dialogue-free bonding between Toothless and the Light Fury. And so all this is going on at the same time, and this sort of culminates in our finale, in our climax. I don't think I'll have to talk too much about the very end. It's still fairly recent. I prefer not to get into spoilers. When I say I cried at the end, it was the good kind of crying. That sort of It's the kind of crying the series makes me do that, you know, you're tearing up, but you're also like, yes! That's the kind of crying this movie gets out of me. So, as I said, I was a little bit nervous about the continuation of Hiccup's story in particular because while I'm not necessarily going to go so far as to say the relationship between Stoic and Hiccup was the absolute core of the films, that relationship was very much emblematic of Hiccup's growth. And it was a big part of why I feel like I can sort of sum up a lot of what works about both films in that relationship. So I was afraid to have it gone. What I mean by that is the first film, while there is, you know, sort of finding someone that you bond with that Hiccup has with Toothless, ultimately it is about, you know, finding your place, possibly even in defiance of those around you. And it's about learning how to stand your ground even against someone you love, which Hiccup has to do. Now, the second film, and I honestly really love this, is sort of the next phase of growing up, which is realizing that even if you've had some breakthroughs before, you don't know everything, and sometimes the people older than you actually do know more than you do. Because when Stoic tells Hiccup in that second film that you cannot reason with somebody like Draco Bloodfist, that, you know, you have to just fight him, and Hiccup says, no, I can talk to him, I can make him understand the way I made you understand, and Hiccup's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. And it was important for him to learn that. It's like, just because something worked once doesn't mean you can keep falling back to that. You have to sometimes understand that you don't know everything. And not only did Hiccup have to learn that, he learned that at the cost of his father's life, ultimately. And so I worried without Stoic there, although we get him in some flashbacks, that it was going to lose the thread. And where it ultimately kind of ends up going with it is it basically puts Hiccup in the parent role, because the dynamic between him and Hiccup, while still very much friends, becomes a bit more of a parent-child dynamic when Toothless starts courting the Light Fury, because now Hiccup has to contend with the idea that Toothless might have a different or better life without him. And he has to learn to let him go, very much in the way that a parent has to learn to let go of their child when they go out and, you know, make it on their own. And when I realized that that was what the film was doing, initially I kind of cringed. I was like, oh God, has the film earned that? And it did. It did. Initially, I was nervous, but it does tackle it in such a way that it doesn't feel like a ham-fisted transition of, you know, Hiccup's overall journey going from, you know, young adult, parent, effectively, as far as the primary dynamic and where he's learning his life lessons go. That did actually work as a total final progression. And also we're getting to see him actively be the leader of of Burke, and like actually have to make big decisions and convince people to follow him, which is actually kind of nice, since usually protagonists in these things tend to be fighting against the authority. So for him to actually be the authority in Burke, at the very least, that works quite well. And emotionally, this thing is just wonderful. It's visually gorgeous. If you can see it in 3D, please do, because the flight sequences are stunning, as they always have been. The action's really good. The dragons are cool and silly sometimes, and fun and scary, some of them. We got some new ones introduced in this one, and some of them are quite intimidating. It's a really good film. If I have to nitpick, and I do because it's me, and if you didn't realize that I was going to do this, hey, welcome to the channel, there are a few things that aren't quite clicking. One is something that is not a complete detriment, and actually neither is, but one annoyed me more than the other. The first thing is the villain. And in this case, we have F. Murray Abraham doing his best Dracula impression as Grimald. And Grimald is a functional villain. Now, to be fair, villains have never really been the big driving force of these stories, which is fine because the driving force is whatever dynamic or growth or lesson Hiccup himself is learning through his relationships with Toothless, his father, learning to let go of Toothless now in this one. So it doesn't necessarily need the world's best villain, but even compared to the last film's one with Drago, Grimald feels just kind of like a bit of a step down, because Drago, especially by the end of that film, you realize was kind of almost a dark mirror to Hiccup. He was what Hiccup could have been under worse circumstances. Whereas Grimald is just kind of a jerk. And he's actually not even that good at what he does. So, like, he gets a leg up on our heroes in the latter stretch of the film, but not because he's smart or clever, but because somebody else was an idiot. And it just makes him less impressive and intimidating as a villain. Again, he's functional. He works. And in terms of pushing that element of the plot, giving them someone who's pursuing them, coming after them, who is a legitimate danger. He's not unthreatening, but he's just kind of there. So that's one thing. The other, and this one bothered me a bit more, is honestly, most of the supporting cast does not have very much to do. And thinking back on it, that's actually been true for at least some of these characters for at least 2 films now. So, like, honestly, most of the supporting cast doesn't have a lot to do. Astrid is mainly there just to be Hiccup's moral support. Valka, that's Hiccup's mother, again, spoiler for the second one, I suppose. She doesn't get any particular highlight moments, but, I mean, she also doesn't feel out of place or shoehorned in. However, the other characters who had been introduced way back in the first film as the other Vikings in dragon training, yeah, they feel really shoehorned in and unnecessary, and like the film just does not know what to do with them anymore. So this is Fishlegs, Snotlout, Rough Nut, and Tough Nut. Those 4, the film just does not know what to do with them, which would have been fine if it was prepared to just relegate them to the background and leave it at that. But unfortunately, it keeps giving them scenes, and the scenes feel awkward and repetitive and don't move anything forward. And you're like, why are we still dealing with these guys? Why aren't they just like at the front of a crowd shot? Now, these characters are not the only ones that feel like kind of not really all that contributing too much. I mean, Eret, son of Eret, Kit Harington's character, he's back, and he doesn't have a heck of a lot to do, but he just feels like he's been integrated into the society. The film doesn't try and highlight him and shove him into extra time the way it does with these other 4. It's just kind of unfortunate that time gets eaten with these characters. I don't want to make it sound like none of the supporting characters work. Gobber is still great. And actually, anyone who's paid attention to the behind the scenes and what was said by the filmmakers about Gobber after the second one, while it is not made explicit in this film, I would have liked it. It's not. There are some, if you pay attention, there are some really clear indications confirming what it was that the filmmakers said about it. Oh, heck, I'll just say it. So the filmmakers, after the first one, said that, well, Gobber's gay. And again, while it's not explicit in this one, there's a couple of lines and a couple of moments where it's like, yeah. Not like he's suddenly effeminate, but just like little lines you're like, And actually, I think he and Eret are a couple. Or at the very least, it's starting. I don't think I'm crazy. If you haven't seen the movie yet, or if you're going to see it a second time, pay attention to the 2 of them. Yeah, I think so. I think I want to wrap it up about there on a more positive note, because I did my nitpicking, but this was really good. If I were gonna do the whole thing, honestly, this is probably gonna be the least of the three, but again, that's not because it's bad, and it sticks the landing, and it sticks it hard in the best possible way. But ultimately, if I were to compare all the component parts and the fullness of the journey to get to that really phenomenal ending, I think the other films are stronger throughout their runtime, as opposed to sort of their strengths being backloaded the way this one is. But this was still a really good film. It was a good time at the movies. It was touching. If you care about these characters, you owe it to yourself to go and see this. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. And I will point out, it does bug me that it makes for a very awkward sort of sequel. How to Train Your Dragon 1 and 2 and The Hidden World. Okay. Pick a naming convention and stick with it. Anyways, have you seen it? What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Whole bunch of stuff to do. Buttons, links, Patreon, P.O. Box. It's my birthday this month. Either one of those would make a great present. I'd appreciate it. Other links to check out besides, give them a look or don't. It's okay, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.